Working title, Adam, that is going to be the next thing we figure out is a title for this thing. But for now, we're just sitting here with a couple of World Baseball Classic hats on as guys who just love sports and love celebrating great games being played across the whole entire world. Brett Gallant, Jack O'Rourke, whatever you want to call him, alongside Ziggy Palfy, also known as the man himself, Adam Unruh. Uno, what's going on this week, first of all, before we get too deep into anything?
Shout out Ziggy Palfy. Shout out baseball. That's baseball, baby.
That is baseball. That's some other stuff too that maybe we'll get into one day. Who knows if we're going to. Adam, biggest story right now in the hockey league really is the trade deadline coming up on Friday. Obviously, the freeze subsides now from the NHL trade or from the Olympics play just a couple of weeks ago. Not a ton of huge moves yet. I saw Connor Murphy got moved. Was that last night or this morning?
I think it was maybe it got finalized this morning, but I think they were, the insiders were fighting for credit on that last night. I think so. I will call it last night.
So yeah, before we got a couple of different teams, and we're going to talk about a bunch of fun things for you guys today. We're going to start out here in a little bit doing some bold predictions for the NHL trade deadline. The Athletic put out a nice article with all of their NHL beat writers, so we're going to tear them down, build them up a little bit based off of what we think of their NHL trade deadline opinions. Then we're going to head on over to the Good Guy of the Week, a new segment here, which I think you guys will have a lot of fun with. Then Hockeydb of the Week, Adam. After we're probably going on 5 years now of me going through Hockeydbs with you. I am so excited that other people get to watch this and this gets to be a real thing put out into the interweb. Fight of the week, and then a little tribute for our guy, Mike Lange, before we head on off to the Puckdoku to end things off. But Adam, before we get into too much of serious talk for the trade deadline, the moment of the trade deadline already happened, in my opinion. Vincent Trocheck, there's rumors flying around every corner of the internet. Every team's calling about getting a guy like him for the playoffs. Why wouldn't you? I've seen Minnesota linked to him a couple of times on the internet in the last couple of days. Well, Adam, as the good parent that Vinny Trocheck is, he decided, hey, I'm going to get ahead of the curve a little bit here. I'm going to talk to my 7-year-old son, tell him there's a chance that, we might be moving towns, crossing ships. And he's like, son, buddy, we might get moved. We might get traded. And his response, Dad, you might get traded. I'm not getting traded. I got a playoff game. I got a playoff run to get to. You have fun out there. Adam, if your dad played in the National League and you were a 7-year-old out in South Fayette and you heard rumors of getting traded, moving off to a new town, what would you be thinking? Are you denying that as well? Are you saying, hey, pack bags, I'm staying?
Well, I mean, it sounds like his son's got a full no move, no trade clause in his. So, I mean, good for him, right? Like that's why the Players Association exists. He doesn't want to move. He doesn't want to move. So, I'm sure they can find him a billet family there up in New York or Connecticut, wherever the hell the Trochecks live out there. But yeah, it sounds like it would probably be best for everybody in the NHL if Vince Trocheck got moved, but it probably sounds like it's best if his son doesn't move. He's probably sick. Like his dad plays in the NHL. Like he's probably one of the best players on his team. If he had to get, their coach is loving that whenever he hears that. So a little bit of loyalty as well in the Trocheck blood. So good for them. Good.
No, you got to love that. Maybe there's a little bit of retained salary on like getting some of his buddies to come join him, like get them out of school for the rest of the year, like make a little post deadline move. But Adam, as we get into the trade deadline, there was 5 different teams' predictions in that Athletic article I referenced a second ago, bold predictions for the 2026 NHL trade deadline. That the opinions that the beat writers had really kind of intrigued me, I guess, to talk about. First one we got here before comes courtesy of Corey Lavalette, and it is for the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the premier teams here in the NHL. Great Stanley Cup odds, obviously. The prediction for them at the trade deadline, they will trade for Elias Pettersson. Adam, do you think that there's a way that shakes out?
I do. I'm going to give it a big fat yes, because I don't think the Hurricanes are a team that's ever afraid to try to make a move that shakes things up. And so I also think that it doesn't play maybe in terms of the favorability of the Canucks, that they've basically become just a huge dumpster fire, unfortunately, in the last year and a half. So I feel like moves for them are just inevitable. And Pettersson's the most high profile guy. He's got term left on his contract, which teams will love and will be willing to trade for him for. So I got a big fat yes on that one. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. I think anytime we're dealing with your good buddy and former friend, Jim Rutherford, being involved in a trade, things can bounce off the walls. A bullet that was supposed to go this way could ricochet off something and head right back at him. You never know how it breaks. But yeah, one thing you talked about is the term left on the deal for Pettersson. And that's where I think think makes this so intriguing. Because if you're looking at the NHL 5 years ago, Adam, or 10 years ago, even before you saw this world where the cap's going to increase every single year, if you're looking at a cap hit for 11.6 for a guy like Pettersson, you might be cautious about moving on from that or moving to get that at the deadline, in my opinion. But in a world where the cap just seems to be going up year after year, more and more every single year, basically, I don't think you're as cautious, I guess is the right word to say, going after a move like that. I mean, especially when you feel like the Canucks getting rid of Quinn too, like that's just such a that town is burning once again. No offense, no jokes there. But they have money to eat a little bit, if they need to retain like 15-20% of that deal.
Yeah, and like people, for those who aren't familiar, the Hurricanes GM is like just a straight up nerd. Like
Really?
I don't know if you've ever seen him.
No.
He's just like a dude that looks like he's like a software engineer. But he's a really smart guy that found his way into hockey as like a secondary type of career. It's not like he's one of these guys that's like a legacy hockey player who turns GM. So he's like a really smart guy. So that there's all kind of like backdoor calculations they got going on. But the other thing I was going to mention about the Hurricanes too, Jack, is that people forget that last year they were inches away from getting Mitch Marner from Toronto. And that was around the time that they dealt Rantanen to Dallas. So before that ever happened, they were a no move clause from Marner away from getting Marner in the door in exchange for Rantanen once they figured that he wasn't going to work there. So they're not afraid to make aggressive moves. I think the fact that they haven't won in the conference finals the last couple times they've been there too is really big for them. Like, I think they're trying to find anything that they can to just get the team over the edge, and they're worried about right now. They're not worried about 7-8 years down the road. So maybe like my bold prediction would be that Stankoven is involved in the deal.
Ooh.
Go back the other way if they make a deal for Pettersson. I think he fits the mold of what they want in Vancouver for future assets and all that. So give me a yes on that one. I think they can do that.
I will match you right there, Adam. Moving across conferences now over to the Western Conference, Colorado Avalanche. Adam started off like I want to say it was through like the first like 2 to 3 months of the year. They were on like Lightning from 10 years ago, Bruins from 3 or 4 years ago, pace of just like total world beaters. Kind of fell off a little bit before the Olympic break. I think they're stabilizing a little bit again now, but I mean, they're not what they started the year as. If they trade for Robert Thomas, though, Adam, there's a chance those puppies are getting right back where they were. What do you think about Vegas Golden Knights beat writer, interestingly, Jesse Granger, saying that he could see the Avalanche trading for Robert Thomas?
I don't know. Maybe because he's a Vegas beat writer, he's used to you guys in Vegas just being able to pull whatever shenanigans it takes to make these miraculous moves. But in my mind, I don't see how they can make a move for Bob Thomas. They just they freed themselves up a little bit of cap room with the deal that they sent Gerard to the Penguins for in exchange for Brett Kulak. And so they've got a little bit of room to work with there, but I don't think it's the cap space that's the issue for them. I just don't think that they have enough assets to give up for Bob Thomas. He's the asking price is just too high for a guy like him. It's not quite Quinn Hughes type level, but it's close. I think you got to have a first round pick in there. You've got to have a prospect of some sort who maybe hasn't played at the NHL level, but is a top end prospect. And then I do think that St. Louis needs somebody that's an NHL level player in return too. So that's 3 big pieces right there. And in my mind, I just don't see that Colorado's got all of them, particularly the prospect pool, just because they've mortgaged so much of their future on their current state of their team. And so they can build it back up, but they just don't have it right now in my mind. And there's other teams. I think Buffalo is one that's really knocking on the door. And with our luck, that will probably happen while we record this right now, because we're amateurs and we're idiots and we're recording this right now in the middle of the trade deadline week. So it'll probably happen, but I don't see it to Colorado.
Yeah, so an interesting name that I have seen linked to Colorado on the internet a few times now, though, and it's a familiar name anytime you're bringing up St. Louis or Colorado, is Ryan O'Reilly. Do you think that a deal for Ryan O'Reilly would make more sense to shore up the center depth in Colorado?
Yeah, that one would be more realistic than Thomas for them, just because the asking price for O'Reilly isn't going to be as high. It doesn't mean it won't be high, but I don't think it's as much as it would be for Thomas. Similar to Pedersen, he's under contract for quite some time. He's got 4 or 5 more years left on his deal, which he's only 26 years old. He just had back-to-back 80-plus point seasons. He's legit guy. So, like, it's going to be high for Thomas, not as high for O'Reilly. So, if Colorado does make a move for a center, then I would wager far more on it being O'Reilly than Thomas. Wouldn't be shocked if it's neither, though.
I was going to ask you about Robert Thomas too before we move on off to the next team, because I didn't really have a ton about Buffalo on the show sheet today at all that we really discussed. A very interesting team has moved towards the trade deadline. There is a little bit we can talk about them that we can get to in a second once we get past these 5 teams. Now that I think about it, but you piqued my interest a lot by saying you're linking Robert Thomas a little bit to the Buffalo Sabres. I'm not saying specific players, you don't have to do stuff like that, but like, what do you think it would take from the Sabres to ultimately strike that deal for Robert Thomas?
I think the one thing with the Sabres is that they have a lot of prospects, and that's the difference between them and Colorado in my mind. Like, they've given a lot of guys a shot, and it's almost like they're a little bit too clogged up right now with their forward room. Just like they've got all these blue chip type prospects that they really like, but when they look at their lineup right now, it's like, where do we put all these guys? So that's whenever you have the opportunity to maybe use one of those guys or 2 of them for making a deal for a guy who is a legit 80-point playmaker right now, which Bob Thomas is. So, like, I think of like a Konsta Helenius, I think of a Yuri Kulik, I think of a Noah Ostlund. I'm not saying that those are the specific guys, but they've just got, like, that's 3 that I can rattle off right for you right there. I don't know a guy in like Colorado other than like Ivan, who is technically considered a prospect for them that's, knocking on the door of the NHL. So
where does Ivan rank on the all-name team?
You might have to give me some more time on that one. He's up there.
It's got to be a top 5, though. It's got to be way the hell up there. Dallas Stars, they will trade for Rasmus Ristolainen, this coming courtesy of Mark Lazarus, who I believe is actually the Blackhawks beat writer. Adam, interesting one I wanted to ask you about with this is you see Sagan go down. You think like winger depth might be a bigger need for Dallas at the time. Do you think that a defenseman is the bigger priority? Is that the direction they go?
I think Dallas is okay with their forward group right now, to be honest. Like, they don't strike me as a team that's worried about not being able to score. And I think the other thing about Dallas is that their blue line is already really good. And like, they've got Heiskanen back there. He's a stud. Like, he can contribute on offense. They're not worried about that. Same with Thomas Harley, like both of those guys were just Olympians. Now, the name you mentioned with them, that the article mentions, is Rasmus Ristolainen, and he was also an Olympian. I could see this one just because Dallas is really, they're all similar to Carolina in my mind. They're a team that's been knocking on the door of the Stanley Cup Finals for the last, 4 or so years, and they really want to get there. And I see one guy on their back end, Nils Lundqvist, who is right-handed defenseman, just like Rasmus Ristolainen, but he's not as big as Rasmus Ristolainen. And in the Western Conference, I don't think that you can put enough emphasis on how big of a body you can have on defense. So I think the physicality of Ristolainen is a really big upgrade over Lundqvist for them if they could get him. And also, I really liked what Elliot Friedman had to say about Ristolainen, which is that he's a player that went and played at the Olympics, best on best, and he didn't do anything to hurt his stock there. And so that can't be overlooked in my mind. If you go play best on best like that, and you can hold your own, right? Like, you look like you belong there. If you're playing in that kind of environment, then you can handle big boy playoff hockey in the Western Conference, in my mind. So I don't know if they've necessarily seen that from Nils Lundqvist, to be honest. And I think he's viewed more of it's supposed to be like an offensive defenseman, Lundqvist, and the numbers for me just aren't really there when I look at it in terms of offense. Like, so, if you're not producing on offense and you're also not a really big body, then I think that
doing?
Area that Jim Nill, their GM, looks at and says, give me Rasmus Ristolainen and let me plug him in there. So I can't tell you exactly what the return would have to be on that, but I could see them looking for, if it's not Ristolainen, at least a bigger right-handed shot defenseman. I think that would slot in where they need it the most on their team.
Adam, a very interesting one from Alan Mitchell over at The Athletic as well. the Edmonton Oilers will trade Matthew Savoy. It seems like with the lack of a first round pick coming up, there's no real assets you can trade out of there. And it seems like a big winger, right handed defenseman, number 3 center, like whatever the need may be for this team, Savoy might be the name who has to get flipped for it. Do you agree with that?
I'm going to say no. And before I give my reasoning, I'm going to back up one step to Rasmus Ristolainen because I didn't know if you had anything to add on that. Another reason why I say yes to that is he's Finnish. They are the Finnish mafia in Dallas. They have 1 million Finns that play for that team. So he would go in and their entire blue line would be speaking in tongues of Finnish while they're out on the ice.
You think they ever get like a white and blue alternate jersey?
They should. I mean,
would that be dope?
Yeah, I mean, they should do a Finnish Heritage Night at the American.
I already do. How many, like, let me ask you this though. So if they do a Finnish Heritage Night in the Big D, like down in Dallas, what percentage of the crowd that walks into the American Airlines Center that night has any Finnish blood in them?
The friends and family section.
That's outside of that, there's zero.
Yeah, no, you're not finding a Finn in Dallas, except for their entire blue line and Rupe
Polar Bear in Arlington
and all those guys. So yeah, that was the last thing about why Rasmus Ristolainen is a no-brainer for them in Dallas, in my opinion. Matt Savoy out of Edmonton, I don't see this one. I think Matt Savoy's having a pretty serviceable year for them, and he's only like 22 years old. And that cannot be overstated enough for a team like them who, like you said, like they don't have the draft pick capital to really expend, but they also need to find a way to like sustain their lineup. So to me, that's a guy you got to hold on to. I like Matt Savoy the way he skates. I think he's a really good skater, which you can't ever have enough good skaters in your pipeline in terms of guys who are young and prospects. I think that more than anything, teams look at, can this guy skate at the NHL level? So I know that's really technical, but I think that you hold on to him for that reason. And this is his first full year in the NHL that he's playing. I think he can only get better, and he should.
It's like bouncing around when you're young like that too.
Yeah, and I think that yes, it helps so much to have a stable environment. Like that's a guy that if I'm in the front office, I want to invest in this guy and tell him that we want him to be part of the future, right? Like you've got all these superstars locked up. Like let's find a way to work this guy in there. He's fast. He's a skill guy. They've got Roslovic signed right now. Like maybe he's a guy that just ends up projecting like a Jack Roslovic type skill goal scorer type player in that respect. Like to me, he's just a good complement for guys that are already driving the play, McDavid and Draisaitl. So I don't like trading him out of there just because the other thing I would say is they haven't necessarily proven that they're having a good enough season this year to give up on a young prospect like that for a rental right now.
Yeah.
What do you
think? No, I think that's a very fair point. I think especially too with them, like if you just, I mean, eventually, that means happens in sports everywhere with every single team. You have to pay the Pied Piper eventually. Like it's going to come for Vegas one day. Like it came for Chicago eventually, even though people thought it would never come for Chicago. I promise Tampa will get it one day. Like when you have these huge contracts, like your McDavid's, your Draisaitl's, like eventually you have to hold on to some form of young talent. Like when you have a Savoy, because like, I mean, what happens if you rip off Savoy right now and say you go get like whatever number 3 defenseman there is, or no, sorry, number 3 center there is lying around, like that's what you think is going to shore up your team for the playoff run. What happens if Leon Draisaitl gets hurt next year in October? And then you got Connor McDavid and nothing, just no hope of anything young. And then you had a bad year this year. You're next year, you do nothing more special. And the next thing you know, like you haven't been, they were out of the finals for a couple of years, and it's not the same team. Like I think you're so right about when you're so cap strapped, you can't really get rid of the young talent.
It's just like, I know they've been to the finals in back-to-back years, and so they probably look at it right now as like, we got to get it done right now. Like we got to get it done.
Look what the Celtics are doing right now, dude. Like, I mean, I know Tatum's coming back early, but their whole entire they're like, hey, they won the finals like 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it was. They've been deep in the playoffs every single year. Okay, we got Drew Holiday's a starter, gone, trading him. Porzingis starter, gone, trading him. Like they move out, get Anthony Simons, and I know he's already gone, but like. And then like that's how you do it. You can have one down year, and even if it's not like a down year, you don't need to go balls to the wall all the way out. McDavid's not 35, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers, I think that, like you said, they don't need to tear it down in that respect, right? Like they don't need to demolish things right now. It's just that they I don't think that trading Matt Savoy is the answer. Like that's not gonna get them better goaltending. It's not going to, unless you can trade for like a stud defenseman or something, that would maybe be the only area that I would consider it. Now they just made the move for Connor Murphy, which you talked about, which it does help them. But if I'm the Edmonton Oilers, I wouldn't be worried about like what's Matt Savoy doing because the offense is not the issue for that team. So unless you can trade him for just an absolute bona fide stud defenseman, it's a no in my mind. And even before that, like actually no, I'm not even going to say before that. Like it's the team defense. That's what's really bad for this team. I'm glad that I have a platform where I can talk to 10 people every week now about this because I've been saying for like 5 years now that the Oilers will never win anything until they decide to try to stop winning games 6 billion in one to 6 billion because like that's all they try to do, man. They just try to patch holes that exist in the rest of their lineup with the dynamic scoring of McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard. And those guys are unreal, but you just can't win important games that way. They've come close, but I guarantee you, if they just spent a lick of their time and effort and assets on any kind of defensive, structure or players that can play actual defense, then they would have won a Stanley Cup by now. It's like the goaltending, like who cares who you put in net? Like if you're giving up 15 grade A's a game, it's just never going to happen. They're never going to have a top goals against average or a top save percentage. It's just I'm getting all riled up now.
I mean, no, they basically just like
It's so obvious what
we're
they
dating back to the Mike Smith days. They're just like, yeah, just go out there and just good luck. They're gonna fire 40 at you a game. You're gonna get 8 2-on-1s and just do your absolute damnedest to stop a puck.
they're
Adam,
yeah.
last one before we head on off to the of the weeks, the other half of the show, the of the weeks portion of the show. The Florida Panthers, according to James Myrtle, and maybe to the Oilers, maybe if they can find out a way to hush about $7 million of Jimmy Hoffa money off of this deal. Sergei Bobrovsky out of Florida, leaving Lottie. Adam, do you see any way that this happens with the year the Panthers are having?
I think that for the tough thing for Florida is that they're probably going to want a high price for him, and teams are probably not